Webinar, Behavior-Based Safety, How Thinking Safe Leads to Acting Safe. A couple of housekeeping things before we jump right in. The slide deck will be posted on hni.com. That's one of the first questions that we always get. So yes, we will be posting the slide deck and sharing with you guys via email as well. We'll be doing Q&A at the end, but feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation. You can do that by typing them into your GoToMeeting console in the little chat window. You can also tweet at us using the hashtag HNIU or with the handle @HNIRisk. So I'm going to turn things over to our main speaker, Kyle Meinert. Kyle is responsible for risk advisory services at HNI. His expertise includes safety audits, safety committee assistance, training, safety program development, and a whole host of other things related to safety and loss control. Kyle has been with HNI since 2014. Prior to joining the team, he worked for the state of Wisconsin, and he also currently serves on the Wisconsin Army National Guard in their recon unit. So when he's not in the office, he's doing drills and hiding in trees. So Kyle, I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Andrea. I appreciate the introduction. So welcome, everybody. I hope you guys are ready to take some information in about some behavioral-based safety programs. This is more of it's an addition to a program, so hopefully we can give you some good information and we can kind of steer you from there. So what is a safety program that's based around behavior? Behavior is a system, behavior-based safety is a system that really sets priority, not the safety system not as a priority, but a core value. So what does that mean? It's not something that people think about it because they have to think about it. They think about it because they want to participate and they want to be safe. It really strives and it really works a lot better if you have all individuals involved. And we'll get into some more tips and some more information to help you guys kind of work this program out so that way we don't have any hitches along the way. Another big thing about behavior-based safety is it actually helps with motivation too. So it helps with motivating your employees to make sure that they're not only acting safe, but they're thinking safe as I've seen it beforehand. So safety, any kind of issue that happens in the field, any kind of accident, any kind of injury that happens can be determined as a systematic flaw in the workplace. So what does that mean? That means that if we don't fix this flaw, eventually that's going to happen again and again and again. And as Herbert Heinrich started talking about too, right before he passed away, he had said that there's 300 near misses, which are those systematic flaws, for every 29 accidents, which actually led to that one big accident, which could be potential fatal or a big.
Can you say those numbers again, Kyle? How
sure.
many?
Sure. Yeah. So we're going to get into a little bit more. So we'll just jump into it right now, though, too. So 300 accidents leads to 29 near misses, or 29. Sorry, let's start again. 300 near misses leads to 29 accidents. Could be like first aid accidents, something minor, where all those 29 accidents then will lead to that one big one. So we have the pyramid, is what we call it. Behavioral-based safety is also based on leading indicators. We're not waiting for that ticker to go up to 365 before we celebrate. We celebrate the wins as we go, because we're focusing more so on the behaviors and not so much on the consequences that lead up to injuries and damaged property, obviously. So big things that we need to focus on when we're trying to roll out a behavioral-based safety program is we need to continuously motivate our employees to keep thinking safe. It's a lot easier for those employees to think safe during these safety meetings, but as soon as they walk out on the floor, if they forget the message, then obviously we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot there. Following up with some educations, reinforcing, and always improving. That's something that I'll hammer on throughout this whole entire presentation, is that we can't just stop where we're at. We need to get farther along that road, and we need to be better as we go. So I kind of talked about this a little bit earlier too. So the ABCs of behavioral-based safety. So we have A being the antecedent, which is the stimulus that actually promotes the behavior. So we have the stimulus, something that we have like a goal, we have a policy put into place, we have something that's making that employee make those behavioral-based decisions. Okay? So that's the first thing that always happens when you start looking at a behavioral-based safety. You need to start identifying the antecedents that are going to lead to the behavior-making decisions. Okay? Behaviors, we don't need to talk too much because I'm sure everyone knows what a behavior is, but those are what that's fueling those consequences. Okay, so we have the antecedent, something leading up to the behavior being made, and decided to make that maybe not start smart safe decision that actually ends up leading to a consequences. So everyone always has a negative connotation when they start talking about consequences, which is, I mean, it's the way we are raised. We think consequences, we think, oh, that person's going to be put in detention, or that person's going to be suspended from work, or something along those lines. But there's also positive consequences too, right? So we have a consequence of a safe working system that leads to 0 injuries, okay? That's a consequence. We had 0 injuries throughout that whole entire year, so that's a positive consequence. Also, too, the one that usually gets more people talking is the pizza parties at the end of the year, depending on what you guys believe in and how you guys roll that out. So we're really going to jump into this right now. So when we start looking at how we're going to actually build a behavioral-based system, there's a couple things that you need to have before you actually start rolling the program out. Number one, and I'll always say this, number one, is getting that employee support. You can't roll a program very well if you don't have people that are willing to buy into it. So how do we increase the buy-in? And what kind of kills the buy-in is if we don't have CEO or top manager, the C-suite buy-in as well. If you're the safety person at your site and you walk out to the field, everyone's supposed to have their safety vest or high visual vest on, their safety glasses on, and a hard hat, and you walk out there in shorts and flip-flops. Obviously, you're not transmitting a very good message. So you need to have that CEO buy-in as well. Another thing we need to start doing too is kind of start delegating down. While we need to have the CEO buy-in, we also need to have somebody that's really going to get behind the wheel and drive this program, because it's going to be their baby and they can then make the adjustments as it goes.
So Kyle, to that point, do you typically see most organizations picking one point person for safety, so like a safety director or a safety manager, or do you see better results when that individual kind of pulls together a committee to help support their efforts?
Sure, yeah. I mean, when we start creating a team, we have to have that point individual, so we have to have that safety director or that person that's really going to drive it, but it doesn't just stop at them. Good question. You definitely have to have a team that's willing to be out there, because more heads, more eyes are better than one kind of a deal. All right, so then when we start looking at them, we start looking at those behaviors. So we need to identify and isolate those behaviors. What happens if we don't identify them is obviously we can't fix them. We need to find a way to control those, and if we can't see what the root cause is, then we're kind of wasting that safety dollar. We're putting that money towards something that doesn't necessarily result in a better consequence. Another big point of behavioral-based safety is we got to have some kind of way to produce data, right? We have to have some kind of metric system put into place that we have a good visual that we can see how our improvements are making changes throughout the system, and also where we can kind of improve on if we're making some changes here and it hasn't had a great hasn't been received very well there, then we know that we can focus on that. If we don't have some kind of metric system put into place and start developing, I guess, the employee feedback and understanding changes that need to be made, then we're spinning our tires here. So we need to have some kind of observable metric system put into place so we can see how it works out. All right. The biggest thing that I like to talk about too is something that I love and it's near and dear to myself is behavioral-based observations. Okay, so that's when we're going out there. We're doing a safety audit, right? But we're not looking for the extension cords laying across the walkways. Maybe that's a behavioral. We start looking back and what was the behavior decision that made that car just stay in the slip trip fall area? Okay, so we don't look at so to speak, the end result. We just need to start dialing it back to really boil it down to what decision was made to leave that cord there. A big thing that I always have a problem with, and it seems like it's a never-ending battle, is that we need to always have some kind of feedback. What does that mean? The feedback means that if we have something that went wrong or something that even went great in the system, we need to celebrate those wins and those losses. So if the worst thing you can possibly do is you get in and start talking about something that somebody did, maybe not the best decision that was made, but you just mark them down, you walk away, what's going to happen? We haven't addressed that flaw, and like I said earlier, it's a systematic flaw, so it's going to pop up again, and that starts boosting that 300 number that I talked about, which eventually leads to the 29. Hopefully we're not to that level yet, but then obviously there's that one big one coming up afterwards. And another big thing that we have with behavioral-based systems, and sometimes why they fail, is we fail to actually get a level of transparency where everyone can see the progress. All right, so we're starting to see progress, and we need to celebrate that win. So how do we do that? Maybe we can have some kind of sit-down safety stand-down. It's something where we can just transmit the message that, hey, this is where we're at. This is where we want to be. And then we can show them the concrete data that we have developed from that metric system that I talked about from step 5. And like I said earlier, we always got to be hammering down continuous improvement. Continuous improvement is very important to any kind of safety system, but it's even more important to behavioral-based safety systems, because if you reach that level, now we need to tweak it, get to the next level. Okay? So if you don't have that next stage or that session planning in place, what happens is we reach that plateau, and we don't improve from there. So those are your big steps in creating a behavioral-based system. So I want to start talking a little bit more about some things that unintentionally can actually slow down the system. Okay? What happens is if we start throwing the safety system out to these employees and we don't involve them in the process, what happens? This is safety 101. You push on that employee, what are they going to do? They're going to push back, right? So it's something that always happens. If you push, they push back. So we need to involve them in the process. This is something that there's been numerous case studies about. Okay, these case studies, even there's actually one at Ford in Detroit where they had a safety program that they're trying. It's about 10, 15 years ago. They're trying to roll a system out and make those improvements. It wasn't happening. So what do? They brought some employees from all different levels of employment in, start spinning those tires, start deciding why it's not happening, because they're the ones that are making those decisions. They start developing better ideas, more useful ideas, and they started getting that positive feedback that they were looking for. So involve your employees. This isn't just on your shoulders. This should also be something that you can actually rely on your employees, that way that you're not just doing all the work by yourself, because I'm sure that everyone out there is extremely busy. So if they have a team working for them, then it helps, I guess, ease those transitional pains as well. So this is just the next talking point is just smart business decision, right? So we never roll out a program to the whole system at once and expect for it to pass, and then what happens when it doesn't pass? And it fails miserably. Okay, so it's always good to start with a smaller area, right? Maybe just do the shipping and receiving area. Start with that. See how they feel about it. See what the kind of feedback they can give you for your initial steps. So that way, when you start rolling out to the complete company, we start seeing that learning curve has sped up exponentially, and we start getting that feedback and that result a lot quicker. So just never, this is business making 101. Never just push it out to everyone at once. Try to do some, testing and make sure it actually works before we start rolling out and put too much of a commitment on something that may not work. This next quote is one of my favorite quotes that I've ever heard. We need to start setting SMART goals, right? Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timed goals. What does that mean? We need to be concrete, but we also need to be concise. We need to know what we're aiming for. We need to be able to measure it, like I talked about with the metric system. It needs to be something that is achievable. Okay. Everybody that's in the safety field will tell you that 0 injuries are achievable. Okay. But maybe we start with realistic times like that. Hey, we've had 20 accidents within the last quarter. We're going to try and narrow it down to about 10. Maybe from there we'll go from 5. Maybe from there we'll go to 2. And then we kind of get that realistic goal, so we can actually get improvement. There's nothing worse than setting a goal, not achieving it, and transmitting that message to your employees, and then the employees are starting to get their morale essentially beat down by that monkey. All right. So I talked about this, and I hit on this briefly earlier too. Is we need to start looking at the root causes. I'm sure a lot of people out there are familiar with those 5 whys, right? Start looking back to why this happened. Why did that happen? So a good example of that is we had an individual that had a spill. Okay, there was a spill of some toluene. So it's a pretty potent chemical that was spilled, and for some reason that employee decided that they wouldn't clean it up. Okay, so they didn't clean it up. What happened then is those fumes and those vapors spread throughout the office area, went into the cubicle underneath because the guy had a fan that was sucking those fumes through. And at that point, that individual fell ill, and now we have an injury that we have to start recording, obviously for the OSHA logs, but then also for workman's compensation and all that goes with the injuries. So why did that happen? Well, that happened because somebody felt like they didn't have the materials to clean up that properly. So why didn't they have the materials? Well, they didn't have the materials because we're maybe back ordered. We didn't have the rags. Well, why didn't we have the rags ordered? Well, we had some kind of miscommunication with the company that was transitioning through the rags for us. and they didn't know that they were supposed to come bi-weekly or earlier than that. So that would be actually the root cause. We just did a couple, maybe not the full 5 whys, but we kind of scaled it back to try to identify the actual root cause instead of looking at the contributing factors, which would be something that we could kind of help curb that and mitigate that loss, but it wouldn't actually control it. The last point is extremely important too. Like I said earlier, rely on your team, rely on your team. So what does that mean? Not only your internal team, but I can almost guarantee you that everyone that's on this call right now has a counterpart that has something, has already rolled out a program similar to this. So, hey, maybe if they're not your direct competitor, maybe call them up, maybe send them a note, ask them, hey, what did you guys do and how did you get that improvement? Okay. If you ask that person, then we're not reinventing the wheel, which again speeds up that learning curve. So I want to start talking a little bit more about some behaviors and some decision making, okay, and how those impact this behavioral-based system. This is a kind of an education process, and we need to start making sure that our employees have this buy-in and start recognizing these shortcuts that we're taking because, hey, we're only going to be untied off on the top of the roof for 2 minutes. So we're just going to go up there, take the anchor point down, and we're going to come back down, and then everything's going to be hunky-dory, right? Well, what happens during that 2 minutes? Okay, I can almost guarantee you, well, there's one of 3 things that are going to happen. It's either going to be the person does it just fine, calms down, and goes on throughout the day. What are we doing there? We're reinforcing bad habits. Okay. So what else happens? Those 2 minutes that you're unhooked, you get a knock on the door. OSHA's here, right? So OSHA shows up. Now we're looking at a substantial time commitment for that, but also a monetary commitment as well. Or the worst possible ending would be that person falls. Now they're not tied off. They could fall whatever distance they're at, and now we're looking at any kind of property. We're looking at injuries. Now this person's not going to be working, so how is this person going to afford the food for his family? Obviously, get working compensation, but there's consequences to every decision that's being made, which kind of boils back to. So making sure that we hammer down the fact that shortcuts are not acceptable in our work area, because those are, just shortcuts are bad decisions. Okay, so if we start taking the right path, the right tool, it might take a couple seconds longer, but that couple seconds that you invest during that first decision-making set could save you a long headache process too. Okay. Another thing that I always hear when I'm out in the field is that, oh, it's common sense that you need to be tied off. You need to be tied off all the time. The only thing that I can tell you about common sense is it's not very common, unfortunately. Okay. We need to always kind of dumb it down to Barney level, right? So everybody understands. Everybody is willing to participate, but they also willing to understand and willing to receive more information how to improve themselves as well. Talk about the real cost of the accidents, because let me think about it. If you start hammering this message down, we're starting to kind of relate back to a personal level instead of just a monetary level, right? The real cost of an accident. I talked about it before. Okay, we have those direct and those costs that are associated. You can get those numbers for, which is the workman's compensation, the medical costs, indemnity, and all the other stuff that comes with the standard insurance-based decisions being made, right? So that's your direct cost. When we start looking at the indirect cost, and if you're giving this message to the employees, they start understanding that, hey, this is more of just a shortcut. This isn't just, the shortcut may have more of a consequence, right? So what about those indirect costs, like I talked about? We have the cost of the family, the pain and suffering, okay? Not from a monetary standpoint, but from that individual that was hurt at work. So now they're hurt, now they're pain, now they have pain, now they have suffering forever, how long it is, right? So what else do we have for indirect costs? There's a lot of things that fall into this, right? So we have, from the business standpoint, we have to have somebody else taking over that position, okay? We're already paying this person for workman's compensation, but now we have an individual that's coming in to replace that person's work, right? So now we're essentially paying 2-man salary. So what else do we have? So we have the training purposes. So not only do we bring a new person in, that person needs to be trained as well, right? They can't just be shown the ropes and then they go out there and do it. No, they have to be trained. There's time commitment involved with that, making sure that they have the correct orientation, which sucks up a lot of time from an HR perspective or a C-suite perspective as well. So this is a big one that I like to talk about too. This is something that's near and dear to me because I feel like this ratio is probably even a little bit understated. I'd probably say that 90% of all that workplace accidents are from unsafe behaviors and unsafe acts, but I'd probably say it's actually closer to 96, 97%, leaving the 3 to lower percentage for the unsafe conditions. Almost every single accident, and I'm sure you guys are thinking, you can think about an accident that you've been exposed to, maybe not yourself, but somebody that you know. What was that injury? How did that injury happen? What's the root cause of that injury? Okay. So I talked about earlier the toluene, right? The vapor fumes that got sucked into the cubicle and made that person fall ill. Okay. So was that an unsafe condition? Sure, it was an unsafe condition for that person sitting in the cubicle. They're exposed to those nasty chemicals, right? But what was the real reason? Why was he exposed to that chemical? He was exposed to that chemical because somebody didn't clean it up, because they didn't have the rags, right? So unsafe act would probably be, hey, this person just decided instead of asking for a new rag, he decided just to kind of leave it. So that's an unsafe act. So when we really boil things down, most of all accidents, if not all accidents, are related to some kind of unsafe behavior or unsafe act. Okay? So if we're translating this message to the employees, what does that mean to them? That to me means that every single accident out there is truly preventable to an extent. Obviously, you have a small percentage. So every single accident can be prevented by a smart decision or a safe decision. Okay? And we need to start checking ourselves too and encourage that throughout your workforce. So if you see somebody that's maybe not tied off for that 2 seconds or walking away from that spill, encourage their employees and their peers to start calling them out on it. It's not a tattletale system, but we're trying to improve that person's thought process from a safety perspective, right? So if we start building this message that, hey, these accidents are preventable, and we're going to be looking more for it from a bigger perspective, and not just for yourself, but for everybody else, we can start mitigating those losses. I talked about this already. This is the Herbert Heinrich pyramid of accident prevention. Okay, he's also a firm believer in the domino theory, where you pull off a domino and it stops the falling forward, right? So that one I'm not going to get too much behind, but I do get behind this pyramid as well. Okay, we talked about it. 300 near misses leads to 29 first aids to 1 big one. So when we start talking to our employees and how we're going to translate this message over to them, we start talking about, hey, if we're going to try to control that 1 big one, what's the easiest way to do it? Do we start looking at that 1 big one by itself and wait for that 1 big one to happen? Or we start looking at more of those leading indicator near misses, okay? So if we start looking at those near misses and we start breaking those numbers down so they don't increase as rapidly, we're buying ourselves more time to put a better control in place that way. That 1 big one never happens, which is what we're all striving for, and which is why all you guys are on this call right now, trying to avoid that 1 big one. So this is another topic that I like to talk about when we're talking about behaviors as well. This one is pretty important because everyone that we're out there in the field, we're doing a safety audit, we try to adjust someone's behavior, saying that, hey, this person should probably be tied off, or somebody that's, let's say construction, you have to be tied off at 6 foot or higher, right? The person's at 5'11", okay? So they're okay, they're not compliantly regulated to make sure that they are tied off. But think about that. If you're at 11 feet or higher, and you take a fall, especially off the ladder, the statistics go through the roof for fatality rates. So what do you think? Is that a compliance related, or is that compliance related, or is that risk related? Well, obviously they're not required under the OSHA regulations to be tied off, so it's not so much a compliance thing, it's more of a risk thing, okay? Compliance is extremely important, and I hope I'm not translating that message wrong. Compliance is important, but it's not enough. We need to start thinking above and beyond compliance and start focusing on the risks, okay? So what does that mean? Compliance is that bottom minimalistic standard, okay? Everyone should be able to achieve the bottom. Maybe not all of that bottom line is going to protect everyone from every accident, though. So if we start incorporating the risk thought process, take a step back and think about those consequences that are associated with that risk, not that compliance-related topic, then we can start expecting a better improvement from our behavioral-based safety. So that brings us to this next we like triangles here. So this is another triangle that I want to talk about as well. So we have the safety, productivity, and quality. Okay. So I want you guys to take a second and think about this. Which one do you think is more important? There's got to be one that's more important, right? Everyone always says it's probably going to be safety because I'm the safety guy. They want to tell me that safety is most important. Okay? Well, it is, yes. Okay? Safety is extremely important. It's not number one, I wouldn't say. There is really no good number one answer for this question. So we need to have all three of these aspects built into the business in order to have a successful business, right? So we need to make those smart decisions. We also need to start thinking about the quality and productivity as well. So if we put all of our assets and all of our information and all of our motivation into safety, maybe we start losing productivity, maybe we start losing quality. So if you don't have productivity or you don't have quality, what happens? You're going to start losing business. What happens then? It doesn't matter what the safety program is then, because they're not going to have a business. Okay? Versus the other two, maybe we put all our assets into productivity, lose quality, the job's done real quick, but it looks like crap, and people are getting hurt. What happens then? Well, word of mouth starts pushing out there, and that maybe you guys aren't the best people to do it. So the real love zone that we need to find is in the middle. Okay? We need to find some place in that middle where we start targeting these behaviors to kind of land somewhere in the middle where safety is a core value, productivity is a core value, and also quality is a core value. Because we can't find that love zone where it's actually all three are incorporated in each decision being made. So before we move on to some more behavioral actual information, this is a question I'd like to ask too. Who is your safety person? Everyone always does, that person is. He is. The HR person is. The safety director is. Well, we don't have a safety director. Well, then somebody else is, not me, right? Can't be me. That's not my job. Well, when we start boiling it back down to behaviors and making those decisions, can that safety director, that's the one person to 300 people, control every single decision being made? Not a chance, right? Not a chance. So we need to start boiling back down to that. Hey, every single person in our company is a safety person. All right, every person out there has that safety decision in their mind. So we need to start making sure that everyone's making that best decision. And again, we're kind of putting that back on our peer shoulders, making sure that everyone's watching out for themselves. Okay, you're your own safety person to a point, but you also have your team working out for you too. And like I said earlier, that's crucial for building a system. You need to have a team. So we talked about this already. How do we build the behavioral-based safety system? Well, it really relates down to culture versus climate. Okay. So what is culture? What is climate? We need to establish that baseline, see where we're at so we can improve from there. Obviously, we talked about this too, is decision-making, observations, and feedbacks. Without those three topics being addressed, we can't really count on our system to really roll out with the most efficiency possible. And again, here it pops up again, continuous improvement. We always need to be better. We always need to be better. So culture versus climate, what does that mean to you? Culture versus climate. We have on the left, we have climate. Climate is more of your snapshot of safety, okay? You can tell if you're in a kind of a culture or versus a climate. If you're out in the field, you walk out, you're the safety director for the day or whatever, you walk out there and all of a sudden everyone starts pulling out their safety glasses, putting them onto the seat, coming to the field. Well, at that point, we have more of a snapshot, right? Instead of having that safety glasses, those pair of safety glasses on at all times, we just have it when we're going to be, I guess, more so afraid of the negative consequences that can come up. All right, so that's your safety climate. When we're starting looking at culture, culture is a system that's put into place, and you can actually, you have a total safety culture when people are doing the right things without being watched. Okay, so without being watched is a key point there. So if everyone's making those smart decisions on their own, we can start assessing that we have a pretty good safety culture here. So how do we improve that? How do we improve it? Okay, and like I said earlier too, we have to have that support from the C-suites, right? So we have to have that people on the top level buying into the safety program, but we also have to have the people on the bottom level buy into it as well. So this question always gets asked after this slide is, how would I know where we're at? Okay, that's a fair question, because if you're seeing a climate, you're the person that's out there, and you see that the people that always have safety glasses on, well, you could have a misconception that, hey, we have a good safety culture. But as soon as you turn your back, they rip them off, then obviously it's more of the climate. How do you know? You ask. Simple as that. You ask the employees. This is a way to establish a good metric system for your baseline. We've designed many surveys to push out there. Now we can tailor them. We can make them fit your own opportunities, obviously. But this is a system where you can go through and give a number assigned to each question and a value. And at that point, you have a good baseline. You know exactly where you stand. As long as you have make sure that everyone knows that they're not going to see the person's name, everything like that. Everything's anonymous, so that way we get a good answer and a good result. We can really start addressing the issues that pop up on these surveys and help target down those risk factors that we need to start controlling. So again, if you need some more help with developing a survey or something along these lines, feel free to contact us and we can actually get something set up for you as well. But the big thing about these is you need to tailor them to yourself, right? You can't just use a cookie cutter survey because some of it doesn't pertain, and then you start having these outliers and these informational pieces that don't actually relate, so you're not getting good data, which is the key to this continuous improvement thing, having data to improve yourself from. So conducting observations. Again, this is one of my favorite things to do, go out there and make sure everyone's all buttoned up and squared up, right? So the biggest thing that we see is we start seeing more of a scheduled observation, okay? So what happens when we have a scheduled observation? That relates back to the employee that, hey, this person's coming out at this time, okay? So now I need to have my glasses on the first Thursday every month. All right, so we have them on. You walk through, you see a great culture, you turn around, and then on Friday, what happens? Well, we don't have our safety glasses on. Next thing you know, we have some kind of shard in our eye or something like that. So that's what we're trying to address and make sure we have the great culture, not the climate. So be consistent with your surveys and observations, but also be sporadic too, okay? Make sure that you're not just going out there on a consistent basis. Make sure you're consistent with a follow-up, okay? Another big thing is what happens is we have people that are out there being those safety cops, those Hectors the inspectors, right? So we have those people out there trying to catch other people doing things wrong. That's not what we're doing. That's negative reinforcement, right? So we're out there, we're trying to catch people doing the right things so we can celebrate those wins. And it's also, you got to keep in mind a little bit of a fairness as well too. Has that employee actually been trained? Has that employee, does that employee know our standard? Because if they're not and you start busting them out on that, then we're kind of are setting ourselves up for a future failure because you're starting to deliver that message to that employee that, hey, they're just making new rules up as they go, so how am I supposed to know? So making sure that we train and give that employee that level of education, that's very important before we start calling them out on it. And again, I talk about this quite a bit too, is transparency, okay? This is one big thing that I see a lot with accident investigations. We do the accident investigation from the safety director. The safety director takes it and turns it into the workers' compensation, wherever else it goes. But then we don't follow up and we don't have a good conversation with the employees about what happened. Okay, so what does that mean? We don't have that message getting spread out to those lower levels of people that are exposed to those systematic flaws. So then what happens? We're probably not going to get a solution. And if we do, it might have that pushback effect, right? So being transparent with your observations. If you see someone that's doing something wrong, follow up, okay? That's the biggest thing, and I talked about it earlier. If you call somebody out for doing something, give them suggestions. Make sure that we have a paper trail established. That way we can start relating that back. But give them suggestions on how they should improve it and where they went wrong with their decision making. Again, you have a team, okay? You should already have a team built into every section that you roll this behavior-based system out to. So if the person keeps having these issues with maybe not wearing their safety glasses, then we talk about what's the next level, okay? Hey, why are you guys not watching out for this individual? Why is this individual allowed to work without having safety glasses on when everybody else has it on, okay? So we're being transparent. We're also following up with the team as a whole as well. So following up is extremely important because if you don't address the error, it's going to happen again, okay? If people don't know that they're doing something wrong, they're going to keep doing it wrong. No question about it, okay? But also if they don't know they're doing something great, something awesome, a little bit of a nudge like, hey, good job. I'm impressed with the safety standard that we've set at this level. Good job, all right? Simple good jobs, or hey, pat yourself on the back. Those can go a long ways. Again, observations lead to feedback, lead to consequences. Again, we talked about bad and good consequences, okay? We need to be consistent with our feedback and we need to be consistent with our consequences. If you're let's say we're suspending an individual because this is the 6th time that they haven't had their safety glasses on, well, the next person that doesn't wear it for 6 times, they better have the same kind of repercussion as the other individual does. Because then you start getting the you did this for that, he's finger pointing, and it doesn't lead to a good culture then as well, and you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot from a culture standpoint. Now, when I talk about does the time fit the crime, obviously we're not maybe we're not laying somebody off or we're terminating them because they didn't wear their safety glasses one time. That's not what we're trying to do. That sends the wrong message, okay? It puts that person into the idea that if I don't do this, I'm going to get in trouble. And what is that? That's negative feedback. People are working under negative feedback. You always have a lot more pushback when you're working under negative feedback, okay? So the verses of negative versus positive, what does positive mean? Positive feedback is more related to the culture. So culture is good. Positive feedback is always going to happen, okay? Those are when we're out there and we're giving the good job. Hey, make sure that you're wearing your safety glasses. Oh, yeah, I got them right here, okay? Simple like that. Simple conversations with that lead to positive increases in your safety culture. So other things that you start seeing with a positive reinforcement too is that people are more willing. There's not that uphill push to get those people to buy into the safety program. Okay, we have a downhill ride down the slope. Okay, so it's easy to roll that out there. And again, when I talk about paper trail, it's important from not only I guess from a safety standpoint, but obviously also back to an OSHA standpoint. The last couple informal conferences that we've been to on behalf of some of our clients and helped negotiate some of those OSHA citations down. The second question they ask after they ask, hey, if you have your GHS training done, is, hey, what's your disciplinary action plan like? And if you tell them, oh, it's really good, we do this, we do that, they're going to be like, let's see it. So if you don't have a paper trail established, in the eyes of the OSHA inspector, we don't really have one. Okay? So establishing a paper trail also leads you back to a metric that you can start incorporating back into the behavioral-based system too. So maybe we have 27 near misses. We have those individuals. We have those highlighted as individuals. What does it start doing? It starts identifying that bad actor, and then we know that we should target more. Hey, maybe we should start concentrating in this specific area. Okay, and we talked about transparency and explaining both the good and the bad. If you start jamming down a safety program that's consistently I guess beating them down, hey, you're not doing this right, not doing that right, become more of that safety cop. And then what happens to morale is obviously it goes down, morale goes down, pushback goes up, okay? So make this easy on yourself. Build a team, but also celebrate those wins with those losses as well. So continuous improvements. This is a slide that I love because it says so much, okay? At one point, we're going to decide if this system is working or not, okay? Or maybe not even to that level. Maybe we decide that there's an area that could use more improvement. Okay. So what do? Do we make another sidewalk? No, we don't. We kind of make a paved path to the right-hand side of the user experience. Instead of fighting that person's, I guess their desire to go to the easier route, let's find that and we actually highlight that and we actually use that to our advantage. So that way we have that rollout a lot more efficient rollout. Okay. So this slide speaks a lot too, because if you keep pushing people to the design side instead of maybe making a path to the user experience side, you're just going to consistently run into negative feedback, okay? And that's not going to help us improve at all. So point in case, we had a story where there's a company that's the printing company that had basically like a median through their parking lot, and it wasn't plowed. Obviously, they're not going to be, right? So what were they doing? During the winter, they're cutting through and making a path, okay? They're making a path through that snow mountain, so it's exposing them to slip, trips, and falls. So what do? They keep trying to put signs up, gated off. What happens to the gate? The gate gets pushed down, people keep walking, okay? So what do the next coming spring? They actually pave that out. So now they have a paved median that goes through the area, so now the person's not walking through the grass and exposed to those slip, trip, falls. They're actually walking down the path. All right, so making those smart improvements that are going to help you and help ease the process of rolling it out. So let's talk about this one more time before we kind of push on to our next shameless plug here. So we have to start setting SMART goals, right? Those specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timed goals. Start setting those. Make sure that we have active engagement from all levels, not just the top. We got to have those decision makers on the bottom involved with those decisions getting pushed out to the behavioral-based system as well. Get that person involved because they're going to have a bigger level of buy-in then too. Make sure we're using those smart observations to actually invest the money and invest the assets into the behavioral system the most efficient route as possible. That we always have that positive or negative feedback because it's going to be needed occasionally throughout, and make sure you're being transparent with where you guys are going throughout the system as well. So this is a system that we've used throughout. It's a pretty good system that we like, and it's something that it's a little bit slow to get rolling, but once it gets rolling, there's some great improvements that we see throughout. So let's talk a little bit about these incentive programs. Incentive programs in the eyes of OSHA are definitely no-go, right? Because it leads to under-reporting and under-recording. Well, we actually developed a system that kind of mitigates that exposure as well. So let's talk a little bit about these programs that fail. Okay. What happens is we have one person that's a bad actor that ends up ruining it for everyone. So that builds animosity. Okay. Animosity. People start getting mad because, hey, we're not going to get that pizza party at the end of the month now. So all because George wasn't the smartest guy in the bunch, right? So that's an issue. So the other thing that starts happening too is we start worrying about those under-reporting and under-recording issues. So we have to find a way to kind of cut that out, and if that's developed, we need to highlight that and be transparent with those findings as well. Okay. So what we start looking at with our behavioral base, I'm going to kind of move along here. Our behavioral bank account was developed actually by Chad Sonic, our president here at H&I. It's a proprietary program that we roll out for individuals. It's more of a profit-sharing endeavor. Okay. So what this system is designed to do, it's designed to kind of identify those weaknesses, those bad decisions being made, and assign a dollar amount to them. Okay. So how does that equal profit sharing? Okay. This doesn't make sense to a lot of people, but it does. If we're already investing thousands of dollars into the losses throughout the year, and now we start putting, hey, we'll give you, let's say, at the end of the year, if you haven't had any bad decisions made, you get a check made out for, let's say, $200, $300, whatever you guys have for your decisions. Obviously, at that point, we start, if we're investing $300 and we save thousands of dollars, there's obviously a positive result right there. So what I'm talking about, though, too, is we have a scheduled event. So let's say it's not really just safety either. So it can be let's say, tardiness, HR issues, people just don't show up for work. We assign dollar amounts to those actions and those decisions, and we start withdrawing it out of their bank account. Their bank account's in quotations, obviously. At the end of the year, they're entitled to a certain amount of money, but if they have withdrawals and deductions out of their account, obviously they're going to be entitled to less amount. So we start kind of twisting those screws a little bit and starting to make them feel the pain as well. Okay, so this is something that really can have the impact to really change it overnight if you start making those smart decisions, you roll this out the best way. This is something that we highly suggest you guys coming to us and we can actually get it set up for you, and it makes the process a lot easier to roll it out because, like I said, there's some pain getting it set up and make sure that it's fair and consistent. Okay? So this is some actual real-world examples that we've actually seen some positive results. We had a manufacturer that invested $15,000 and ended up saving almost $55,000. So it's quite a bit of money that they've saved just by just giving them that positive reinforcement that, hey, you're doing a great job, keep doing it. Okay? There's another big one. It's a substantial one, right? We had $25,000 invested in this company. They ended up saving over $500,000 from, I guess, more of the workman's compensation and property damage standpoint. Another big one that we can see too is we had a company that essentially put these procedures, this behavioral bank account into process, and they had a substantial change overnight. Okay. Now they put a little bit more into it. They put a little bit more of an incentive to those employees, but those employees stopped making bad decisions that end up costing the company even more money that they had invested. Okay, so this program is called our behavioral bank account. This behavioral bank account is a program that we assign values to bad decisions, and we start making those individuals feel that pain. Because we're feeling it already anyways, right? Because we have to pay that out. So we make them feel a little bit more pain as well. So I know we went over a lot of information in this short amount of time, but feel free to ask questions as we go, or as you come up with them throughout. We'll leave our contact information if you have any more questions that pop up maybe not in this short amount of time. Feel free to contact me, call me, whatever have you, and I'll do my best to get you an answer if I don't have one.
Yeah, so before we jump into questions, just wanted to share a little bit of information about our next H&IU webinar. It's on May 15th, entitled Navigating the Workplace Generation Gaps in Transportation. So we have a few questions coming in. Just a reminder, you can type your questions into the chat window in GoToMeeting, or also on Twitter using the hashtag H&IU or the handle @HNIRisk. So Kyle, starting with a question about the behavior bank account, can you talk a little bit more about how this works? Is it basically an incentive program where you earn dollar amounts, or is it
Sure.
deductions? How does that work?
So the way the program actually works is you set up a certain amount. So I'll use a specific example. We have a company that invested quite a bit, and we had those positive changes basically overnight. They invest $2,500 in their employees. Okay.
Is that annual or?
It's annual, yes, and
okay.
It's prorated based off of I guess when they start. So the second year that they're full-time employees, and that's when they're entitled to the full amount. Okay. So this individual he got into a fight at work. Okay. So that's a pretty substantial loss there. So and it has potential for even more loss. So we had a pretty good deduction at that point. So that individual that was involved in those altercations, both those individuals got deducted approximately $250 off their account. So that's a pretty big shot for one bad decision. So it's not they're not accruing more money. They have that money that's set up based off of when they started to work, and they have those deductions taken out of that account, and then the money that they're entitled to at the end of the year. Make sense? Another big thing about that too is we need to have something built in so we don't have those underreporting and underrecording issues. So that way, if we identify someone that has had a safety accident or a violation, they haven't reported it because they don't want to take that deduction. Well, at that point, we have to basically wipe out that whole entire the amount that they're entitled to, because that's just transmitting the wrong message, and that's not what we're trying to do at all.
Okay. Kyle, you talked about kind of a safety climate versus a safety culture, and using surveys to kind of gauge where you're at with that.
Yep.
How frequently would you recommend a company do a survey, and do you recommend paper, electronic?
Okay, that's a good question. Obviously, there's a transitioning more towards the electronic because it gives them a little bit more of anonymity, right? So they're not going to be as exposed to handing those sheets in, so that people of their leadership can see what they have said. But we need to also kind of make sure that they're comfortable with the survey before we start rolling out, so we don't have that issue. But I would suggest that we start maybe rolling these out at least biannually, or else if you've made some kind of substantial change, at that point, then you can kind of start seeing establish a better baseline and kind of do it at least 6 months out, so that way you can start seeing the changes, and it's actually a good message that's being sent home, either good or bad, I guess. Okay. Biannually, so the short answer.
So, Kyle, looking at rewards for safety programs, is it a good idea to have like small gifts or pens, gloves, those kinds of things for rewarding the good behavior when you do see that?
Yeah. If it's a leading indicator and you identify it, I caution against just doing a random, I guess, a random incentive for someone being safe. But if you see someone doing a good leading behavior, or let's say that they identify an issue and they come to you with that issue, hey, give them something that maybe it's just a good job or a kudos, but at least give them something. Whether it's just a communication message sent out to the company, maybe not just giving them a pen, but identifying that person and identifying what they did. That way you can kind of give that message that, hey, these people are going to be recognized for smart decisions, and also if they're looking out for everybody else as well, too.
Okay. Kyle, you talked about doing behavior observations and making sure that you're kind of observing how people really act in the field. Can you talk a little bit more about like how to do that, how often to do it?
Sure. Like I said, we got to kind of avoid ourselves from setting up a schedule, okay? But we also need to make sure that we're doing it. So the way that you do it is the best bet, in my opinion, to do that is obviously it's an unannounced visit that you're kind of watching for a little bit. Now, you don't want to be heck to the specter and just kind of watching them and kind of creepishly spying on them, right? We need to sit back and we need to start looking at the decisions that are being made. And I mean, like I said, if you find something that's going wrong, you can identify a bad behavior. Everyone knows what a bad behavior is. So if we identify that, we write it down, we talk to that person about it going forward. Then you can set up checklists, but just caution yourself from being blinded by that checklist, because people have checklists produced and you can find them on the internet. But what happens is people don't look throughout. They look at what's on that checklist and they don't think about the other consequences that could be happening right in front of their faces.
Okay. And Kyle, you talked about the example where employees were kind of just cutting around the sidewalk and
Sure.
walking through the snow, like taking a little bit of a shortcut to save some time.
Yeah.
Are there any other examples of like times where maybe you observed the way that people behave in the field and you kind of changed your approach or your policy to fit the way that people were working?
Yeah, so I mean, there's changes that you have to address your culture and your climate. So it's unique to every single company out there. So whatever works the best for you, make sure you're using that. There's other things that you can do too. I mean, identifying people for making those smart decisions is usually the best route. And if we start doing that, then we start showing the message, like I said earlier, that, hey, we care about it, we're trying to make those best decisions. So as far as actual examples, sure, I mean, you see them almost on a daily basis, right? So point in case, we had a company that was out there that maybe weren't making the best decisions, and we kind of rolled out the behavioral bank account to them. Well, let's say that they're exposed to a fall hazard as well. This is more so a scaffolding issue. At that point, people were putting scaffoldings up that weren't matching. They're putting scaffolding, obviously there's a huge standard that's related to scaffolding. They weren't having firm footholds put into place. At that point, what we did is we actually set the company, we kind of put them on a stop work process, so we kind of pulled them off, everyone off, and we took them around and we showed them, hey, this is not the proper way. When we're telling people that, they know, right? We're just pointing out that we can see this, everyone can see this, everyone driving by can see this, you know, OSHA inspectors can see this, anybody that's willing to make a decision can see this. So at what point do we start kind of taking safety out the window and just getting them productivity or quality? That's where we got to start scaling it back and showing them people how actually we need